Alright, brace yourselves. This is a long one. Finally, we have the DPS tier list. So, when evaluating the DPS is an interesting problem. DPS currently has 4, maybe 5 metrics that make each individual DPS strong. And when I was evaluating the DPS to put them on this list, I wound up getting into a counter circle. So, there are DPS that counter other DPS, and it's incomplete. There are lots of gaps, but it skewed my results every time I tried to rate them. So instead of rating them off of their value or what they individually do well, I decided to do it based off of purely their contributions in the current meta. So while number 1 might be countered by number 3, or, numbers 6 and 7 might get countered by 16 and 17, their value is individual. So for people who think that Mercy makes a hero, Mercy does make the hero. The other heroes that require Mercy are going to be lower on the list. Heroes that don't require Mercy are going to be higher. If you need somebody else to do something for your hero to be good, I can't rate it high. And then in the case of some of the heroes, they're going to be skewed specifically because of breakpoints in the game. But I genuinely think that the breakpoints are a huge one. For anybody who doesn't know, there's a 200 DPS breakpoint in the game for a one-shot that covers over half the roster. And that's one of the major points going forward into this. So when we start evaluating the DPS with this next one, keep that in mind, that 200 breakpoint is huge and it skews the results. So first and foremost, we're going to have Sojourn. Like, it's not even close. Sojourn is going to be in a situation where she is going to completely and utterly run the table on everything. She's going to wind up ahead of the curve in almost every instance because of the railgun. The railgun and the disruptor are so strong that she's just oppressive. And the problem with Sojourn is not that railgun is a one-shot headshot. It's the problem that you can use the railgun to finish kills. So people can be at 40 health and you have a 40% charged railgun and you can finish them. It's the strongest finisher in the game currently. It's super, super strong. I would like to see Sojourn addressed fairly soon because she is currently broken. Next, we're going to get into Genji. So with Genji, Genji's in a situation where he's the perfect duelist. If you hold your cooldowns to be reactive, you should never lose a fight unless you run out of cooldowns or you have multiple people on you, but then you just dash out. Dash having a reset is super strong. It's completely and utterly game breaking. I actually think that Genji needs a massive nerf along with Sojourn. I don't think that Genji will ever be balanced until he gets that addressed, and I think he will be perma-meta. I think that for 6 years, we had Tracer and Genji being perma-meta, and the fact that just now, because everybody else got buffed so much, we are finally seeing less Tracer, proves that they were really, really strong during that time frame. And the only reason that Tracer isn't higher on this list, like Genji, is because she didn't receive some of the benefits. Genji lost the ability to be countered by a Winston tank. You can no longer just flex a tank to counter a hero, so Genji comes in at number 2. At number 3, we're going to have Sombra. So Sombra is super oppressive to a single person. The hack, being able to chain it, is arguably game ruining for one person. Her damage bonus on hacked targets makes it so that she can assassinate stuff in the backline. I think that Blizzard is conscious of this and will make an effort to change her going forward. But I genuinely think that her kit, outside of the hack, just her right click, not her EMP, it's the only issue. If they applied some sort of massive cooldown to her right click, I think that it would fix a lot of the issues around Sombra. I think that primarily the root of the frustration from the player base and the bulk of her power comes from being able to spam the hacks. So if invisibility was on a timed cooldown and the hacks were timed, I think that it would be better. But that's what puts Sombra at number 3, is she can abuse 1, 2, maybe 3 targets for an entire game. And that's what puts her here. So coming in for 4 is going to be Widowmaker. Widowmaker is the queen of that 200 point breakpoint I talked about. Sojourn is currently the best. Sojourn hits that 200 HP breakpoint more than any other hero in the game. Close second is Widowmaker. So with these four heroes, Sojourn, Genji, Sombra, and Widow, I got into a question of, well, Sojourn and Widow basically are snipers, and then Sombra and Genji are flankers. So every time I evaluated them, I wound up in a situation where I would put one above the other, above the other, above the other, etc. And you follow the thought process. Well, what I wound up deciding to do was evaluating their raw hits, and outside of the one-shot potential, Widow doesn't have anything. I actually think Widow's pretty much perfectly balanced. I don't think that she does anything super, super well outside of the 200 breakpoint, and I think that she's in a good spot. I think flankers counter her, and she's mitigatable. So putting Widow at 4 here, I think, is safe. Coming in at number 5 is going to be a shocker for some people, but it's Mei. So Mei is above the 200 HP breakpoint, and she provides an insta-cleanse for herself, which increases survivability, which increases damage. The losing of her CC on her left click was compensated by giving her more damage. So Mei's left click is almost like 100 damage per second, if you can track. Her damage is actually kind of nuts. Her right click is, I wouldn't say terrible, but it's definitely less of a hit scan, more of a bursty close quarters thing. She's a brawler, and she's arguably the best brawler in the DPS category, which puts her here. I also think that she counters currently some of the highest tier tanks and supports in the meta. So Mei earns a higher spot now than she used to. Her utility and a bunch of the stuff let her play Brawl specifically. She can also be used as a tech. I think that she belongs here at number 6 or 5. Reaper comes in at 6. So Reaper's super strong because of the reaping. The reaping is what makes this hero. Like, Death Blossoms, meh. His Hellfire shotguns get kited. He has teleport and he has a purge, but the reaping is what really sells it. So if you get a kill and you get the roll damage passive, where you get increased reload speed and movement speed, Reaper can close in on any target. So Reaper becomes the ultimate chain killer. So if the opposing team is stacked and you can get a Reaper kill in the pocket, you should be able to kill the entire opposing team, because your heals per second on the reaping doubles effectively when you get the DPS passive. This is one of the heroes that I think the DPS passive broke, and I think that if they removed the DPS passive, I think Reaper would fall down this list. But I think that reaping and the damage passive make him super strong. So coming in at 7, we're going to have Hanzo. Hanzo arguably is in the same situation Widow is. He doesn't do anything particularly well. He has a bunch of utility tools, but realistically, you can't use those utility tools to create kills. So he relies fundamentally on the 200 HP breakpoint one-shot potential. I think that Hanzo, like Widow, suffers greatly when teams have mitigation or the ability to counteract his damage. So unless it's a one-shot, he doesn't get value. I actually wanted to put Hanzo further down this list. I think that Hanzo would be a bottom tier, like maybe in the 15 or 14 range, if it wasn't for the fact that he can one-shot. The only way I could see them ever making Hanzo strong like the other people, and maybe this is the direction Blizzard wants to go, if Storm Arrow did full damage. The fact that Storm Arrow doesn't do full damage currently means that Hanzo lacks major burst in the pocket, and he has to play wide and look for one-shots. So that's why Hanzo is here. So coming in at 8, we have Cassidy. A lot of people put Cassidy as bottom tier, F tier, like they think he's terrible, but the real strength of Cassidy is he's above the 200 HP breakpoint. A Cassidy can peak something that other people cannot. He can also out-trade pretty much every flanker in the game, and if you hit your headshots or you hit your shots in general, his DPS is still really good. The combat role damage mitigation actually pushed him higher than some of the other people coming up on the list. I've actually mitigated almost like 2 to 3k damage in some games with the roll if you time it correctly. You can mitigate a pulse bomb. Cassidy will live if you roll a pulse bomb. I've rolled Pharah rockets and lived. I've rolled Junkrat mines. there's a lot of shit that Cassidy's role pushes him past with his 225 HP, and I think that he's a good midline. I think that he belongs as the baseline now over Tracer, and I think that that's why he winds up here. So coming in next is 404 Not Found, our new Bastion boy who had a bug. The new rework, I would say, made him weaker, but stronger in other concepts. So he lost the Sentry form, but gained the Sentry form. He gained the artillery, but lost the tank. So when you look at the configurations for Bastion, what really sets him apart is, again, the 200 HP breakpoint, and then using the damage reduction in Sentry. I think that in Brawl, I think that Bastion is king, and we will see that going forward when he comes back on the 25th. I think that he's one of the few heroes, if like one of the only heroes, that can fight a Sojourn and not get blapped. I think he's super important, and the fact that we don't have him right now is an indication of why the meta is the way it is. I would definitely love to reevaluate him come the 25th, but that's where he sits middle of the tier right now. So coming in next was a surprise for me, is Symmetra. So Symmetra, with the loss of the flex tank, its damage went down. The teleporter got changed, and I arguably was going to put Symmetra way lower because I thought her purpose was gone. But Symmetra has a neat little trick, and it works better in 5v5 than it did in 6v6. And that's that Symmetra can tunnel. If Symmetra tunnels one person and you have good tracking, you can pretty much guarantee a trade. So on top of being able to guarantee a trade, you also have a bunch of, tech stuff like TPs across point, TPing 3 turrets to their back line. I think that Symmetra brings a lot of tech and that she has potential here. I think that she does have massive weaknesses at range. I do not think her new right click is oppressive. I think that it's actually really weak. And I think that the biggest selling point for Symmetra is the shield, because you get another shield and your tank can be free. That's why Symmetra goes here. The turrets don't do enough damage unless you stand in her for a really long time, and her left click is super strong. So going into next, we have TORBJÖRN. So TORBJÖRN, again, is bugged like Bastion, but I would still say that TORBJÖRN is lackluster. Without overload, I think TORBJÖRN is really weak. He's odd job. I mean, he's short, character model makes him okay. His shotgun, I would say, is weak compared to other shotguns in the game when you look at like Roadhog or Junker Queen or Reaper. I think that while he provides anti-tank, anti-flanker in his turret, I think that his damage is definitely lower than it should be, and I don't think that he can contribute. The only reason he's here is because, again, Overload puts him at 350 HP, or 200, or is it 300? I think it's 300 HP, it might be 350, don't quote me on that, I haven't played Torb in a hot minute. But I know that he goes above the break point and allows you to push into people. Molten Core, I would say, is arguably weaker in 5v5, so that's why Torb winds up here. So coming in next is going to be Soldier. Soldier wound up in a situation where he got a buff because they took the flex tank out, but he got a nerf because he didn't get anything, and they added a better version of him. So when you look at Railgun, Railgun is just a shorter cooldown version of Rockets. So Sojourn has better mobility, arguably the same damage per tick on her auto attacks, and a better finisher. So because because Soldier 76 doesn't have that good finisher, he's going to wind up in the situation a lot where he's just going to get out-traded. The Biotic Field and Kiting will give you a better fighting chance, but I still think that Soldier is relatively weak. And this is partially due to, I guess, they balance around aim and hit accuracy now. I would actually like to see Soldier buffed so that he's comparable to Sojourn. If they don't nerf Sojourn, I would love to see Soldier buffed. Otherwise, there's no reason to play him ever when Sojourn's in the game. That's it. Coming in next, we have Tracer. So with Tracer, I actually had a problem. So because I play at higher tiers, I'm skewed in the fact that Tracer's value is high. At lower tiers, Tracer is actually super weak. So because of that 200 HP breakpoint and the way that some of the heroes got redistributed, there are actually a lot of heroes that can survive Pulse Bomb at 250 damage. It's a lot more than you would think. Sombra Recall, you have May Ice Block, Reaper Wraith, Cassidy Roll, Molten Core, or not Molten Core, Overload, and a few of the other abilities push you above the problem. And I think Tracer struggles. I think that the high ground presence and everybody having mobility means that Tracer can't stick to targets. I think that supports are more mobile and more survivable now, which makes her value go down. I still think she has the ability to walk in and one-clip somebody, but that's only at high tiers. At low tiers, you probably won't ever see that. So it makes her overall weak, and I think that she belongs here or maybe lower. Coming next is Junkrat. Junkrat is an oddity. So at high tier, Junkrat looks like he needs to be nerfed. But in reality, Junkrat needs a buff. Junkrat has no tools that allow him to close without blowing his damage. So in his case, I would actually like to see Junkrat get an HP buff. And I think that maybe then we would see more brawly Junkrats. But as it sits right now, a lot of Junkrat is just spam. Maybe trap trade, holding your mines to do a double mine, and securing kills that way. But I genuinely do think his left click and his overall kit is weak. I would like to see Junkrat buffed with either more HP or more damage. Both would work. But until those things happen, I can't see putting him high unless you're a one-trick. And then if you're a one-trick, obviously he goes way up. But I think that he belongs this low. I think that he's really weak going into the current meta. So coming in next, we have the worst hit scan in the game, is Ashe. So I played a shit ton of Ashe at the beginning of the wipe, thinking that Ashe was going to be good. And the problem is, with Ashe's kit, is Ashe revolves around having a Mercy Pocket. If she doesn't have a Mercy Pocket, she can't hit the 200 HP breakpoint. So if she can't hit that breakpoint, she's terrible. Dynamite is mitigated, and there's so much healing in the game that it's not meaningful damage. Bob is good, but with the projected Bob nerfs and the ones we've already seen, if they make it so that Bob can't contest an objective and he can't push cart, I genuinely think that Ashe is going to fall to probably right where she is here. Like, I don't think she'll ever recover, because she's just a worse Cassidy at this point. It was the other way in Overwatch 1, where Cassidy was just a worse Ashe. And now we have the problem where, again, we have two heroes that share the exact same kit that can't be in the same space. And I think that Ashe's niche is not there because she doesn't have enough damage on her left click. So that's why she's this low. All right, so coming into these last two, it should be pretty obvious. It's Echo and Pharah. First, we have Echo, and the only reason Echo edges out Pharah is because she has higher damage per second. Flyers in Overwatch inherently, without having the ability to have a Mercy Pocket, are trash. And they have to have higher damage or higher HP. And Blizzard has to break this chain. If they do not break the Flyer Mercy chain, we are going to be stuck with these heroes being garbage without their pocket for the entire time, because we're going to balance them based on these things. So Echo lost her ult doing 600 HP and is now 300 HP. You cannot copy tanks, arguably, because you just get blown up, focused down. Her damage is still insane. She does a lot of damage. But the problem is she cannot survive without the Mercy. And if you can't survive without the Mercy, what's the point in picking the hero? You're just going to fly up and die. I mean, you could do some flank stuff, which is also why I edged Echo over Pharah, but it's going to wind up that same situation. And then you have the worst DPS in the game currently, in my opinion, which is Pharah. I think that Pharah's damage is entirely too low for her kit. I think her ultimate is probably one of the weakest kill ultimates in the game. She can hover and fly. Concussive is super strong for environmentals, but that's about it. The rocket launcher without having the Mercy Pocket means you have to do double directs versus a direct and a splash. When you detether Pharah from Mercy, Pharah gets to the point where she's countered by 3/4 of the DPS roster. She's just an overall bad pick. I would love to see them give her more HP. I think that that would fix Pharah's problem. I would give up damage on Pharah if her rockets did 100, but they gave her 300 HP. I think that is the strongest thing that they could do to Pharah, because as it sits right now, she cannot be meta without Mercy, and we have to break the shackle of pockets balancing out DPS. And I also have covered in my support video, I don't think the damage boost and Discord have a place in the game anymore. So, again, to circle back around, when evaluating the DPS, I definitely feel that the DPS, when you detether them from any support or tank, and you evaluate the 200 HP breakpoint, it makes it so that you get a tier list that looks like this. I do think that Sojourn, Genji, and Sombra are all super oppressive and need to be looked at. I think that Widow being top tier, being high risk, high reward glass cannon, that doesn't really do anything well except for one shots is perfectly fine. I think that May and Reaper have found their niche finally because they're above the breakpoint. When evaluating Hanzo, Cassidy, and Bastion, there are lesser versions of previous DPS. Like, I would say Bastion is a brawler, you know, hit scan, but he's not as good as, say, Reaper. You look at Cassidy, Cassidy's not as good as Sojourn. When you look at Hanzo, he's not as good as Widow, which pushes them down the list. The big problem with DPS is we have copies of the exact same fundamental objective. A one-shot, a brawl, a flanker. And I think that that's a problem. And I think that they need to reevaluate DPS going forward. I think the DPS identities have been lost for balancing reasons. And I think that that's dumb. I think that we need to look into potentially making so each character in the DPS category is more signature, like in the support category. And I think that that might fix some of the problems. But for the most part, for the support category, I think that D.Va mitigates over half the category, which is why D.Va wound up being number one. I think Zarya mitigates another half, which is why Zarya wound up being number one. And also being the worst. But realistically, at the end of the day, I think that when you take the other roles out of the equation, we wind up with a situation where the DPS looks like this. Again, Pharah and Echo without Mercy are trash. Ashe is in the same situation. She's just a worse Cassidy. Junkrat was really weird for me. I genuinely thought I was going to wind up placing Junkrat higher, but when I kept evaluating his damage and his cooldowns, he just doesn't have enough. I genuinely would like to see Blizzard look at all of this stuff and see what happens going forward. But that's going to conclude the DPS video. My next video is probably going to be a meta video for compositions. It'll probably be about 12 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. Depends on how much time I want to put into explaining each composition. And then other than that, I hope you all have a good one. Much love. You can like, comment, and subscribe, and I will look in and read. If you disagree, you can more than welcome to start a conversation in the comments. Be nice to each other. People in my videos, I don't care if they're bronze, eyes people. But much love, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye-bye!